If you've ever posted something about the church, a question, something from your own deconstruction, something you learned that changed things for you, and then had someone show up in your comments who just seemed ready for you, this episode is about that.
Hannah and Jess, we got away. Now we're unpacking what they won't say. Behind temple walls and cover-ups. We're pouring tea in your coffee cups. It's the post-Mormon post-mortem. Digging up what they want forgotten. Trauma, truth, and crime, yeah, we're surviving. It's post-Mormon post-mortem.
A few weeks ago, someone showed up in our comments. Her handle is @TheShore Foundation. She left 3 comments, one after another. Missing scrolls, Chicago fire, cultural syncretism. Each time one claim got answered, another one appeared. It felt like a conversation.
It wasn't. Here's the short version of what that exchange was actually about. In 1835, Joseph Smith and a group of his followers pooled $2,400 to purchase a collection of ancient Egyptian papyri from a traveling exhibitor. Smith claimed to translate them as the Book of Abraham, and it's now canonized LDS scripture. Those papyri are the physical evidence at the center of one of the most significant historical problems in the Mormon faith. One of the arguments deployed in our comments was that we can't evaluate Smith's translation because the scrolls were all destroyed in the Chicago fire.
The papyri survived. A portion of them was rediscovered in 1966 at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And you remember this from our gospel topic episodes on the Book of Abraham. Egyptologists have translated them. We know what they say.
When you're on the receiving end of it, it feels like you're losing, like they know something you don't. The ground keeps shifting, and that feeling is accurate. They did know something you didn't.
This episode is about why someone showed up all prepared in the comment section, because behind that kind of comment is a 501c3 nonprofit, private donors whose names are not public, professional studio space, SEO training, and an explicit organizational goal: missionary productivity.
And the church, officially, has nothing to do with any of it.
Here's what we found.
These arguments weren't invented to explain evidence. They were invented to escape it. So let's back up. A few weeks ago, we posted our Book of Abraham episode. And I want to be specific about what that episode was based on because it matters for everything that comes after. We weren't working from outside critics of the church. We weren't pulling from anti-Mormon sources. The primary source for that episode was the church's own Gospel Topics essay on the Book of Abraham. It was published July 8th, 2014. Quietly. There was no announcement at General Conference, no article in the Ensign, just there on the website if you knew where to look.
The essay says something the church didn't used to say out loud. It acknowledges that LDS and non-LDS Egyptologists agree on the central problem. The characters on the surviving papyrus fragments do not match Joseph Smith's translation.
Right. So we shared a carousel with the highlights of that episode. And the Shore Foundation showed up in the comments. 3 comments. I'll walk through the sequence specifically because the sequence is part of the story. First comment. I'm going to read it directly. Quote, "In the discipline of history, you cannot make conclusive statements if you don't have all the texts. I'm not sure why this explanation is unsatisfactory. Even if it's true, he didn't have the Book of Abraham on any of them. You still cannot make these assumptions without knowing the full library. This is why the archaeological and historical record is incomplete in many, many places throughout time because of the loss or destruction of texts." End quote.
So the first claim is that you can't make a conclusion because we don't have every text Joseph Smith owned. And that sounds reasonable for about 5 seconds, because incomplete records are a real issue in historical work.
And that's what makes it effective. It's not wrong as a general principle. The problem is what it's being applied to, which we'll get into. And here's the thing that defeats it, not from outside critics, but Smith's own paper trail. The Egyptian alphabet and the grammar papers. They were produced by Smith and his scribes, and they directly connect specific Egyptian characters from the existing papyri, the ones we have, the ones that were at the Met, to specific passages in the Book of Abraham. Smith wasn't claiming he translated some separate missing scroll we'll never find. He was claiming those specific characters on those specific papyri meant what he said they meant. His own documents make the missing scrolls argument impossible. But hold that, because then, boom, the second comment arrives. Quote, "You know that there were many scrolls, and they were all destroyed in the Chicago fire? To say we have conclusive evidence this fragment is what Joseph was translating from is fallacious." End quote.
So now the claim has changed because first it was that the record was incomplete, and now it's that the scrolls, all of them, were destroyed in the Chicago fire, like a factual claim, but we can check factual claims.
Yeah, we did, and it's wrong. This is the cleanest moment in the whole exchange because it's not a matter of interpretation. The facsimiles are not missing. They survived, they were rediscovered in 1966, and professional Egyptologists have translated them in detail. And Smith's explanations of those facsimiles are verifiably wrong, not ambiguous, not incomplete, wrong. He identified a standard Egyptian funerary scene as Abraham on an altar. He misidentified the gender of figures in facsimile 3. He labeled Anubis, a well-documented jackal-headed deity, as a human figure. None of that requires a missing scroll to evaluate. The images are right there.
And the church acknowledges all of that. It doesn't deny any of that. The essay doesn't deny any of that. Part of the collection of papyri did end up in Woods Museum in Chicago, and that portion burned in 1871, but that wasn't the whole collection. Another portion had already been separated, and that portion eventually made its way to the Met in New York, where, as we said, it stayed until 1966, when a University of Utah scholar, whose name I cannot recall, I think it's Egyptian, recognized what it was that he was looking at. Egyptologists have translated the surviving papyri, and the church acknowledges in the essay that they're standard Egyptian funerary documents for Hor. Good old friend Hor. So the problem is not that we're missing the right scroll. The problem is that we have material that Joseph Smith directly connected to the Book of Abraham through his own documents, and it says something else.
Right. But then she's back with a third comment right after the Chicago fire claim has been answered. Quote, "It also seems you're not willing to engage with the idea of cultural syncretism or symbology repurposing. The same image can be interpreted to have different meaning depending on who is looking and when we are looking, even within ancient Egyptian civilization, which spanned thousands of years. They themselves found different meaning conveyed through the same things."
So now the Chicago fire is gone, and we're talking about cultural syncretism. That matters because the answer changed as soon as the last claim got answered. Like, she wasn't even, it was more of a monologue than a conversation, right? One claim fails, and then without even acknowledging that that claim existed before, she just slots another one into its place.
Right. So let me explain here. Cultural syncretism is a legitimate scholarly lens, but here's what it can't do. It can't explain away specific named claims. Smith didn't say this image carries possible Abrahamic resonance. He said facsimile 1, figure 1, well, that's the angel of the Lord. Figure 2, it's Abraham fastened upon an altar. Figure 3, the idolatrous priest of Elkanah. These are concrete identifications of named individuals and specific events. Syncretism doesn't explain that. It sidesteps it. And here's where the syncretism argument actually falls apart structurally. It just proves too much. If symbols can mean anything depending on who's looking, well, then no translation can ever be wrong, including Smith's. That's not a defense of the Book of Abraham. That's the elimination of the concept of accurate translation altogether. An unfalsifiable argument isn't a historical argument, it's a retreat from one.
Absolutely. And as I said, the way that she frames this comment, like it seems like you're not willing to engage. I mean, apart from many things, it moves the focus away from like, no. I'm trying to talk about Joseph Smith's actual identifications, and it puts it on you, Jess. Seems like you're just not open-minded enough to have an honest
No.
dialogue. So now the issue is like, are you fair? Are you open? Are you willing? It's like, that is useful framing for you if evidence is itself the problem and you don't want to talk about evidence, which is what we want to keep focus on.
Agreed. And that's not how someone defends something they believe is true. I mean, look at all three together. Not one of them defends what Smith actually said. Not one says, here's why Smith was right. Every single one argues that the evidentiary standard itself can't be met, or that you're the one being unreasonable for applying it. Missing scrolls, you can't conclude anything without the complete record. Chicago Fire, well, the record is gone. Syncretism, the record means whatever the reader decides it means. Those are three different arguments with just one function. Make the question itself unanswerable.
So the question this episode is asking is not unanswerable. It's who built this package and how. So that's the pattern we're looking at. Three arguments all doing the same job, keeping Joseph Smith's actual claims out of the conversation. Where did those pre-packaged arguments come from so ready to go?
But before we answer that, I'm going to ask you to please hit like, follow, or subscribe. Do it wherever you are listening. Okay, back to the episode. When we started pulling on the thread of At the Sure Foundation, we found something that goes a lot deeper than one person in a comment section. There's an organization called the Ancient America Foundation. As Hannah mentioned earlier, 501c3 nonprofit. The employer identification number is 74 236 3812. It was founded in 1983. And on their own website, they lay out 4 mission pillars. I want to read these out loud because the language does a lot of work. Mission productivity, gospel advocacy, informed testimonies, faithful scholarship.
Faithful scholarship is the phrase that jumps out. That means the scholarship is supposed to say inside the faith claim. That's certainly not asking where does the evidence lead. It's asking how do we defend the conclusion that we have settled upon.
And then there's a line on their website that I keep coming back to, and I know you do too, Hannah. It's their own language on their own site. Quote, there are things the institutional church cannot do, and others it chooses not to do. End quote. Let that sit for a second. That is an organization describing its own function in plain language. We exist to do the things the church can't be seen doing.
Is this the right time to raise that the church is suing Mormon Stories podcast in case people accidentally mistake Mormon Stories podcast for some affiliation with the church? And here are this organization saying, we exist to do the things the church can't be seen to do to get its hands dirty. The church has spent years, for example, trying to move away from the word Mormon, because it's a win for Satan every time it's used.
Mm-hmm.
The nonprofit, it doesn't have to play by those rules. It can use the search terms that people actually type to make the arguments the church doesn't want to officially make because it's verifiable nonsense, and still move people towards the church's preferred conclusion. That's the arrangement.
Now, the creator arm of AAF is called the Faith Creators Alliance, or FCA. And this is where it gets very concrete. The Deseret News covered them in March of 2026. They have studios in Orem and Springville. They have professional editing, SEO training, mentorship, conference access, sponsor connections. There are 70 plus creators in the network.
They also have staff coaching creators on audience growth. So this is not just a bunch of members posting because they feel driven and inspired to do so. This is a funded operation with studio, editors, training, strategy, and people whose job it is to help Mormon creators grow online.
And then there's the pipeline. AAF runs a digital marketing operation called Discover the Book of Mormon. It's a DBA, which is a doing business as, under the same nonprofit umbrella. The way this works is this: creator posts content, an audience member or a big audience finds it, interested people are captured with their permission and routed directly to missionaries. Creator content becomes missionary contact. It's a conversion funnel with a nonprofit wrapper.
And the money comes from private donors, so it's tax exempt and the donor list isn't public. So the people funding this work are protected from public scrutiny. I mean, you should be embarrassed, while the work itself is aimed straight at the public.
Book of Mormon Central, now Scripture Central, shares deep personnel roots with AAF. The people who built that apologetics infrastructure are the same people running this one.
A concrete example is the We Are Creators Conference. It's a gathering for women in the Mormon creator space. Give me strength. The Faith Creators Alliance sponsored it. So when you put the pieces together, this is organized, funded, and strategic. Its stated purpose is missionary productivity and gospel advocacy. And one of the things it produces is trained, resourced, SEO coached creators who know how to show up online to argue apologetics in comment sections.
Comment sections like ours.
There are some layers of institutional contradiction here that are worth naming one at a time.
Yes. The first one is the sharpest, and it requires being precise because there are actually two different things happening at once, and the two-layer version is more damning than the simple version. So the church published the Gospel Topics essay in 2014. In that essay, it acknowledged that both Mormon and non-Mormon Egyptologists agree the characters on the papyri don't match the Book of Abraham. That's a real concession. It's the kind that, if you're a member who didn't know this, can be genuinely destabilizing.
But the church didn't concede everything in that essay, as we've talked about. The papyri and the facsimile problem, yes, they conceded. The characters don't match. Egyptologists disagree with Smith's identifications in the document. But on the missing scrolls question, the church hedged. The essay says that evaluating Smith's translation ability, and this is a direct quote, is likely futile given the incomplete papyri. The church planted that hedge in its official document.
So then what does the machine do with that? Well, it takes the church's own hedge, the likely futile language, and it deploys it at scale in common sections across the internet. The church writes the hedge, the nonprofit turns it into a talking point, and the creator delivers it in your replies. That is the pipeline made completely concrete, and everyone's hands are clean. The church published an essay. The nonprofit trained creators on the content of that essay. The creator showed up in the comments.
And when At the Shore Foundation deployed her missing scrolls argument, she wasn't going rogue. She wasn't arguing against the church. She was echoing the church's own language back at the people who had just read the church's own essay. That would be us.
And that's the first irony. And it has two layers, and both of them matter. So I want to talk through each of them. The first is on the facsimile problem. The characters, the identifications, the Egyptologist conclusion, the church conceded, as Hannah mentioned. That's in the essay. And the machine pivots away from it. The syncretism, cultural ambiguity, anything but the facsimiles. The machine here argues against its own institution's concession. And the second layer of irony here is on the missing scrolls. The machine, this creator network, and the church are reading from the exact same document because the church planted the hedge. So the essay itself says that evaluating Smith's translation is likely futile given the incomplete papyri. The institution quietly wrote that into its own official record, and the machine picked it up and scaled it into every common section on the internet. So it's one big machine, but two modes. And when the evidence cuts one way, argue against the church's own concessions. When the evidence cuts the other way, amplify the church's own hedge. The church benefits either way, and officially, it has nothing to do with any of it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the creators themselves. The Faith Creators Alliance, the FCA creators, present as like this grassroots, organic, self-motivated, inspired by the spirit and driven by faith. They're spirit-called believers acting on personal promptings they would have you believe. The Deseret News article quotes creators describing divine nudges to post. Yeah, they're feeling a divine nudge from their bank balance. I felt
Mhm.
called to do this. The Lord pushed it into my heart.
I mean, maybe that's true. And
Maybe.
belief and coordination aren't mutually exclusive. I mean, the creators in this network may genuinely mean every word they say. And that's actually what makes this operation so effective. The sincerity is real.
But behind that sincerity is, as you said, this professional training, this professional studio access, and coaching in growing your audience, a non-profit structure whose stated purpose is gospel advocacy. At what point does I felt called to post become, it's part of your job description? It's your job to post.
So I want to be careful with this next thing that I find really ironic because it can easily land us dunking on individual members. And that's not what I'm doing. That's not what Hannah's doing. The target here is the institution. So let's name that clearly before we say it. Russell M. Nelson issued a social media fast in 2018. He warned at the 2025 General Conference that, and I'm quoting, the present hostility in public dialogue and on social media is alarming, end quote. Church leaders have repeatedly, consistently cautioned members about screen time, contention, digital culture, the dangers of the online world.
I can speak personally to how alarming the hostility of the Mormons in our comment section is.
I can too. I can attest. Yeah.
While a non-profit aligned with the church's mission runs a 70 creator social media influence operation, you know, the prophet saying like, oh, it's a hostile environment out there, log off.
Right. To be clear, the individual creators in that network aren't the target of this irony. They
Some
believe
of
they're
them
doing
might be.
something. Some of them, well, yeah, I can think of a couple actually. But I think for the most part, these creators believe they're doing something meaningful. They probably are doing something that they genuinely feel called to do. The contradiction lives at the institutional level between what the profit says publicly and then what the nonprofit does operationally. That is where the irony belongs.
Yeah, the nonprofit says, here's your ring light. Okay, so the fourth irony that we were talking about closes the loop, and it's the most matter of fact, which is actually why it lands the hardest. AAF's own disclaimer on its Discover the Book of Mormon site states that the content is, quote, neither made, approved, nor endorsed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, close quote. Wait, I'm just expecting the church to come and sue them at any minute. Even with
Okay.
even with the disclaimer, because people
Even
with
with
disclaimers can still be
are
very
still getting
confused.
sued. Yep.
People will be very confused going and accidentally thinking it must be church affiliated.
Must be. AAF's people wrote that themselves on their own website. So the church maintains clean hands. The nonprofit does the work the church can't be seen doing. So the disclaimer isn't hidden. It's right there in plain language on a site that exists to route people to missionaries.
Exactly. And that's why I'm expecting the church to sue them any day now,
Any day. They
right?
don't want those people.
Isn't it only fitting? And people might accidentally assume it's affiliated with the church.
I
And why
know.
wouldn't they?
Just like Mormon Stories
And
podcast.
why wouldn't they when it says we exist to do what the church can't be seen to be doing? The church benefits, obviously. Okay. They know about this. They endorse it. They don't sue it out of existence. The church benefits from the influence operation. The creators believe, apparently, if you take them at their word, that they are acting on spirit, the promptings of the spirit independently. The donors fund the work that the church officially doesn't endorse. So, as you said, Jess, everybody has clean hands.
If this is landing for you, or if you're recalling a time where you said something in someone's comment sections and there was somebody that showed up with all of these ready made answers, well, please support the podcast. Any dollar, any contribution that you give us through our Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee helps us do the research, helps us dig up these people and share this information so you know what you're being subjected to.
And Jess will leave no stone unturned. Believe me. So let's bring this back to the person in the comments, because I don't want to leave this at the institutional level. I want it to land where it actually lives, which is in the specific experience of having someone, in your replies sounding that prepared, even though, believe me, the second somebody quotes a scripture, I am out, I'm asleep. Sorry, I didn't hear that. I was too busy snoring.
Yeah, man,
I've just started directing people just to the video you did on why it's futile to quote scriptures at X moments. Doesn't work.
That's a good call and a great reference. At the Sure Foundation wasn't lying about being a believer. I mean, she probably is one from what I could tell looking through her stuff. And so that's not the claim that we're making. The claim is that belief and coordination aren't mutually exclusive and that the coordination is real, it's documented, and it's well funded.
Right. And if you encounter a trained, resourced SEO coach to create it in your comments, whose arguments never seem to run out and who just pivots cleanly every time to one apologetic position after another, obviously you're not in a conversation. Knowing that doesn't make the arguments go away, but it hopefully changes how you might be prepared to engage with it.
For anyone listening who's in deconstruction or who has been, this might be why it felt the way it felt, why the arguments seemed endless, why they always sounded practiced, why there was always another comment ready. Because some of them were, because there's infrastructure behind them, because someone built the pipeline and someone funds it and someone trains the people who show up in your comments. I have to say how surprised and perplexed I was, going through and this back and forth with at the Sure Foundation. I remember sitting there reading and I'm like, what is she talking about? And how is this even relevant?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it clicked. It was like, wait, there's something here. And I had to go over and look at her Instagram page and I
Mm-hmm.
see all of these beautiful, they're perfectly framed and the colors all aligned on her posts. And then I start watching a couple and want to vomit based on the content and her just horrible definitions of what it means to be an
Mm-hmm.
ex-Mormon who needs therapy. But I then started to realize, okay, wait a minute. This person didn't just randomly
Mm-hmm.
stumble across this
It's not
post and then
organic.
have this stuff in her back pocket. This person was trained. This person has a script. And this person really shouldn't be here in what is supposed to be a safe
Yeah.
space for our eternal family.
100%. When we very first got on TikTok, I was like, who else is out? Who are the other Exmos out here? And I had come across this, young lad. I mean, young to me, right? Like 20 years younger than me, if not more. This young man in his early 20s who had deconstructed. And I really liked his insights. And just recently he posted, hey, I started this page, when I was deconstructing or whatever. And he goes, one thing I wasn't prepared for is just how much backlash I would get
Mm.
from Mormons in the comments, right? just the apologetics, but made very personal, right? Just really like going below the belt. And that's why I think this matters. It's designed to keep you from speaking out,
Hmm.
right? It's meant to shut you up. It's meant to. If you have left, you are supposed to leave quietly with your tail between your legs. Never speak of
Yes.
it again.
And I think it's
And
meant to discredit you. It's meant to seem plausible. It's meant to make it look like you don't know what you're talking about and they do.
mhm,
It is very highly thought out and it's easy to fall into the trap. So read it for what it is.
right. And if you're not in deconstruction yourself, if you're someone who's had these conversations with a family member, a friend, or someone who you love who's still inside, the same thing is true. If it ever felt like you were arguing against something that wouldn't move and logic means nothing to it, you didn't know who you were dealing with, and now you do.
You do.
The question we want to leave you with, not an answer, just a question. What does it mean that the institution needs this?
If the evidence were on the church's side, if the papyri said what Smith claimed they said, if the facsimile identifications held up, if the gospel topics essay didn't exist because there was nothing to quietly concede, would the church need a nonprofit influence machine to argue against the implications of its own essays?
Yeah.
If this episode hit close to home, if you recognize something when you've gone to comment sections of creators that you follow, think about what that means. You belong here. Find us on Instagram or on TikTok at Postmormon Postmortem or at postmormonpostmortem.com. And another quick little nudge, a 5-star rating really helps other people find us, and subscribing helps us grow this chosen eternal family. And it genuinely makes a difference.
Really does. We thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate the time of Mick to do our sound recording, Tanner W for our theme song vocals, and to Dr. Dave for his guitar. And then what?
Hannah.
And what else?
And what else? Hannah, before we go, I
Yes,
gotta
Jess.
say, I'm so sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
I am sorry for what I said when I was Mormon too.